everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are discussing the film Swing Bout. Briefly, this is an unconventional boxing film which follows Toni moments before a career-making match. The film takes place largely in a locker room and a bunch of offices. Toni, played by Sierra Berkeley, is exceptional as this young athlete who gets this massive opportunity for her first fight. And I actually think the film is strongest when they focus on Toni, because Toni is introduced to us as really at the cusp of a life-changing moment. The movie starts with Toni listening to this very inspirational recording about finding purpose and fighting demons. The recordings are actually a very clever strategy the film uses to get us inside of Toni's head and get us to really know what kind of person she is. Because the whole movie takes place backstage, we never actually see Toni fight, but based on the way she's presented to us, she comes off as an incredibly talented athlete whose self-belief is the difference between success and failure. Her opponents feel like caricatures, but they really do a good job, if not at creating tension, of at least anticipating this fight, because there are certain characters we're introduced to where you do kind of want to see them knocked out. The movie actively wants you to root for Toni. Now, the story in terms of theme is very basic. It's the execution that I think is very unique. What's fascinating isn't the challenges that Toni is presented with, it's how she responds to these challenges. Toni is given this opportunity of a lifetime. However, this opportunity is dependent on her throwing this fight. And this fight would pretty much guarantee financial security, at least for a short-term period of time. However, it would cost her her self-worth and dignity. I thought watching Toni's reaction to this offer and then trying to process it is where the story was strongest, and I wish the movie lingered there a lot more. Toni is very naive, and she has a naivete that's quite relatable, where she does her best and she's expecting a certain result, and she's presented with this cruel reality you only see on TV. However, we do know these things happen, but I think when it's happening in front of you, it's a bit of a shock, and I think that shock is what Toni is able to capture really well. And I think if the movie focused exclusively on Toni and this internal battle and used these recordings to try and really get us inside her head, I think it would have been exceptional. Instead, the movie divides its time between all these characters that we don't really need. We focus on a bunch of promoters and managers who are really struggling in their personal and professional life. The drama revolving around the promoters felt underdeveloped, and it actually distracted from the main storyline. And I think because we were so distracted and because these two storylines don't weave in seamlessly, it ends up reducing all this tension the movie had worked so hard to create. I also think the editing didn't help. I mean, at the start of the film, you're anticipating this fight. It feels like it's around the corner, but the editing is very calm. They transition between scenes very smoothly, and so that sense of urgency is gone, and suddenly a fight that felt moments away feels like it's years away. And because the tension leading up to the fight decreases, because we're distracted by all these side characters, it becomes harder and harder to maintain that connection with the main character. Overall, I do think this is a filmmaker worth watching out for. Again, I think less would have been more. I think the idea of just monitoring a young athlete just before a fight and then having this drama with the promoters around it could have been really spectacular. The voiceovers were also very unique and engaging. There were parts where I wanted to rewind, because at first they feel like something you would hear on like Instagram or like just very corny, but because of the character, it adds a layer of depth to these words. But towards the end of the film, it really did feel unfocused and you kind of forget the thread. And so if you've seen this movie, please let me know what you think, and until